People say every family has a favorite, but in the Hart household, favoritism wasn't subtle, it was structural. It was tradition. It was law. And from the moment I could understand language, I knew exactly where I stood in it. My name is Lena Hart, the older child, the quiet one, the responsible one. My younger brother, Ryan, was the golden child, the sun around which both our parents orbit. And me? I was the eclipse nobody looked at for long. Our childhood home in Portland was beautiful from the outside. Warm lights, well-trimmed hedges, Dad's restaurant signs glowing proudly in the distance. People said we were the kind of family you'd see on a Christmas card. They didn't know the truth. Christmas cards were the only moments we ever looked like a family. Dad adored Ryan, told everyone he had business in his blood. Ryan broke a rule. Dad laughed. Ryan failed a test. He's creative, not academic. Ryan wrecked his car texting at 17. He had a replacement within a week. I still remember watching him roll into the driveway in a shiny new vehicle, while I stood beside my own. A garage sale bike Dad had spray-painted blue to match Ryan's ears. Clear. That's how it always was. My version was the thrift store copy of whatever Ryan received in full. Mom was no different. Her affection was selective, strategic, reserved almost entirely for the son she adored and the image she curated. If Ryan so much as sneezed, she fussed over him like he was a national treasure. If Ryan brought home a participation ribbon, she displayed it on the mantle. When I won first place at the regional design competition at 14, Mom didn't even look up from the laundry. "That's nice, Lena," she murmured. Then, without missing a beat, added, "Ryan is volunteering this weekend. He's making real impact." Real impact. Those words followed me for years. Some kids rebel under that kind of injustice. Not me. I kept trying. When I got into the Seattle School of Design, a dream I had chased since childhood, I came home, waving the acceptance letter like it was oxygen. Dad barely looked at it. "If you walk away from the restaurants, you walk away from this family," he said. Mom nodded behind him like a shadow, agreeing with its source. Ryan smirked, satisfied. He didn't say a word, but he didn't have to. His smile said everything. "You were never meant to leave." But I did leave. I worked nights waitressing, tutored freshmen, lived off instant noodles, and mailed postcards home every semester, postcards no one ever answered. I built a life outside their shadow, and my success grew from scraps they never cared to see. But no matter how far I moved, one truth followed me. In my family, Ryan was the heir, and I was the helper, the scapegoat, the invisible daughter who existed only to support someone else's spotlight. What I didn't know then was that the very thing they used to diminish me would one day become the reason I finally walked away and never looked back. Leaving home for design school wasn't just a milestone. For me, it was the first breath, after years of drowning quietly. But to my family, it wasn't an achievement. It was an inconvenience, a betrayal, evidence that I was stepping out of the role they had assigned me since birth. When I arrived in Seattle, I felt something unfamiliar. Possibility. The city breathed differently. Glass towers, rain-soaked sidewalks, coffee steam rising from cafes like small promises. I'd walk to campus each morning with a notebook under my arm, sketching storefronts or light fixtures or whatever sparked inspiration. For the first time, I wasn't the background character in someone else's life. I was the protagonist in my own. My parents didn't see it that way. Dad refused to attend my orientation weekend. He said, "Design isn't a real career, Lena. You'll be back when you're done playing." Mom chimed in with a soft but cutting, "You're too sensitive for that industry. Come home when it gets hard." Ryan sent a single thumbs up emoji. That was their version of support. But I thrived. I worked nights at a cafe, slept too little, drew until dawn. My professors noticed my precision, my instincts, my grit. I won small design contests, secured internships, even had a restaurant owner commission a mural for his dining room. I emailed photos home. No response. I called to share good news. Voicemail. I visited during holidays. Ryan's accomplishments real or exaggerated filled dinner conversations. Mine were brushed aside with polite nods or swift topic changes. By the time I graduated with honors, I knew my worth. Unfortunately, so did my family, but in a different way. When I moved back to Portland, I hoped the distance had softened something in them, that maybe success outside the family business would earn their respect. I should have known better. Dad invited me to a welcome home dinner at one of his restaurants. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't mention my degree. Instead, he handed me a menu and said, "Look it over. We can find a place for you hosting tables or running social media." Something simple. I froze. I'm a designer, Dad. I want to build spaces, not wipe them down. He waved a hand like I'd said something childish. "Interior designers come and go, family stays. Ryan's taking over the restaurants someday. You can help him. That sentence you can help him summarize my entire existence in their eyes. Mom tried a different tactic. She took my hand, smiled in that saccharine way she does, and said, "Why struggle under someone else when you can support your brother? He needs someone steady, someone mature." Ryan arrived late to the dinner. 25 minutes past the reservation time. Still adored. He slid into the booth and said, "So you're back. Does this mean you gave up on the art thing?" Art thing? As if the years of work, debt, exhaustion, and victories were a hobby. But what hurt wasn't the dismissiveness, it was how casual it was. How automatic. How unchallenged by either of my parents. A week later, when a local boutique offered me a small design contract, my first official project, Mom reacted by sighing. "Lena, is that really stable? Shouldn't you focus on something practical? What if it fails? What if you come crawling back embarrassed?" But I took the contract anyway. And then another. And another. Soon, restaurants, ironically, Dad's kind of places, started hiring me to refresh their interiors. My work gained traction on social media. Clients recommended me. My calendar filled. Still, at every family gathering, Dad boasted about Ryan's leadership potential, Ryan's instincts, Ryan's future in the business. When relatives asked what I did, Mom answered for me, "Oh, Lena, she's doing little decor jobs here and there." Little decor jobs, despite the fact that my income had surpassed Ryan's by then. It became painfully clear. My success didn't fit the narrative they'd written for me, and anything that didn't fit was minimized, ignored, or dismissed. Looking back, that devaluation wasn't accidental. It was strategic. Because as long as my independence looked small, they could keep me in the role they needed, the helper, the supporter, the invisible daughter holding everything together while receiving none of the credit. What they didn't realize was that every dismissal, every belittled achievement, every quiet insult was building something inside me, a strength they never expected, a resolve they couldn't break, a future they would have no place in. Independence was supposed to free me from my family's expectations, not tether me more tightly to them. But life has a way of revealing who people truly are, not through what they celebrate, but through what they expect you to sacrifice. For my family, my independence wasn't a milestone. It was a resource. The first request came wrapped in concern. Dad called me one wet November morning, his voice unusually soft. "Pump at the Hawthorne location broke down," he said. "We're short this month. Just a small loan." Sweetheart, you know, family helping family. I hesitated. His restaurants made healthy money. Why was he asking me, a freelance designer, for help? But he threw in the one sentence that always unarmored me. "Ryan's overwhelmed. Don't let him drown." So I lent him $3,000. He didn't say thank you. 2 weeks later, Mom asked if I could temporarily cover one of their utility bills. "It's just the statement date that got us," she said, waving it off. "Once the business cycle catches up, we'll repay you." They didn't repay a cent. Then Ryan called. He'd gotten a speeding ticket and didn't want Dad to find out. "Spot me just this once," he said. "It'll save me a lecture." I paid it. Not because I wanted to, but because I remembered the nights I'd studied until dawn, wishing he would step in and help with anything, a chore, a bill, right, and he never did. Helping him felt like rewriting a history that had already been written, except it didn't change anything. It simply set a precedent. Before long, the small help became part of my routine. A bill here, a repair there. A quiet bailout slipped into their lives so seamlessly that they stopped seeing it as help and started seeing it as infrastructure. When Dad needed new equipment for one of the restaurants, he said, "Transfer the difference when you can." When Mom wanted to redesign the dining room for an upcoming charity gala, she said, "You're the creative one. Just handle the expenses." When Ryan backed into a mailbox again, he asked casually, "You using your card or mine for the damage estimate?" No shame, no gratitude. Just entitlement coated in familiarity. I kept telling myself I wasn't being used, that this was what families did. That one day, when I needed something, they would show up too. But that day never came. Not when I fell behind on rent during a slow work season. Not when I got the flu so badly I couldn't lift my arms. Not when one of my major clients delayed payment for 3 months. The only difference they noticed was when I didn't answer their calls quickly enough. The worst part, their demands always came disguised as emergencies. Dad would say, "It's the business, Lena. You understand." Mom would sigh, "We just want to keep everything running smoothly, don't you?" Ryan would joke, "Come on, sis. You're the responsible one." And little by little, the support I offered became the support they expected. At one point, I was covering 2 restaurant bills a month, part of Mom's medical prescription costs, Ryan's insurance, household repairs, credit card, late fees, and any crisis, big or small, they happened to manufacture in a single year. I spent over $32,000 on them. I didn't have savings. I didn't take vacations. I didn't buy anything unnecessary. I wasn't living a glamorous designer life, I was living a patched-together existence, funneling everything I earned into a family that believed they were entitled to it. Once, when I hinted I might scale back, Mom said gently, "Honey, don't be dramatic. You make more than you need. We'd do the same for you." But I knew they wouldn't. They never had. Still, I kept going because helping felt better than admitting the truth, that I was the financial backbone of a family who didn't even see me. What made it worse was how they spun it. At a cousin's birthday dinner, I overheard Dad telling relatives, Lena's doing little to core jobs, living stress-free. Meanwhile, Ryan's handling real responsibility. Ryan nodded proudly, not mentioning that I'd just paid off his credit card balance the day before. I swallowed that bitterness the way I'd swallowed every dismissal since childhood, but a part of me was starting to wake up. Not in a dramatic lightning strike moment, just slowly, steadily, each time I checked my bank account and wondered why I worked so hard to feel so empty. I didn't know it yet, but the day would come when they pushed one step too far, and the quiet daughter they had depended on for years would finally choose herself. By the time autumn rolled into Portland and the leaves began to burn gold, I had become so accustomed to being my family's silent safety net that I barely recognized how lopsided everything had become. I kept paying. They kept taking. Life moved on in its unbalanced rhythm. But betrayal doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It slips through cracks when you aren't paying attention. And sometimes if you're unlucky, you walk right into it. It happened on a night I wasn't supposed to be home. Dad had called a week earlier, asking me to come to a family dinner. He said it in that clipped tone he used when pretending the family was still intact. I went because I still believed showing up mattered. I still believed effort meant something. But the dinner had been another disappointment, another night where Ryan dominated the conversation. Mom praised him between bites of her salad, and Dad asked me for just a little extra help with the restaurant repairs. Not advice, not ideas. Money. I went home annoyed, exhausted, but still hoping things might shift someday. A few nights later, I realized I'd left my old design portfolio in the attic, the one holding sketches I needed for an urgent client presentation. Driving back to my parents' house, I rehearsed how quickly I'd slip in and out. 5 minutes. Then home. When I stepped inside, the house smelled like pot roast and rosemary. Voices drifted from the dining room, low and familiar. I froze before, calling out. Then I heard my name. Dad's voice firm. Absolute. She doesn't get anything, Margaret. Not a cent. I didn't breathe. Mom's fork clicked against her plate, her voice uncertain. But Lena has helped us so much. That was her choice? Dad cut in sharply. Ryan's the only one who cares about the business, about the family. The estate goes to him. House, restaurants, accounts dash everything. Double quotes everything. Ryan laughed lightly, smugness dripping from the sound. Knew you'd choose right, Dad. Blood roared in my ears. I pressed a hand to the wall because suddenly the room tilted. I wasn't expecting an inheritance. I'd never asked for one. I didn't want their property or their businesses. But hearing them erase me so casually, as if I'd never been part of the family at all, felt like a blade sliding between my ribs. Mom's voice wavered again. She did pay for my treatments, Stephen. And that was her responsibility. Dad snapped. You don't reward someone for doing what they should have done. As if I owed them my life savings. As if my sacrifices were obligations engraved in stone. Ryan clinked his glass. So it's settled. I'm the heir. My stomach dropped. Not because of the inheritance, but because Mom didn't defend me. Not once. Not even softly. They kept talking, their voices drifting like poison through the air while I stood at the bottom of the staircase. A ghost in the home I grew up in. For a moment, I imagined stepping in, confronting them, demanding answers for every unspoken dismissal. But the words lodged in my throat. Silence held me by the shoulders. In that silence, something inside me cracked clean through. Not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle shift, the moment a bridge quietly gives way under. Years of weight. I backed away slowly, careful not to make the floorboards creak. My fingers skimmed the banister, the same one I'd slid down as a child, now cold and unfamiliar. By the time I reached the front door, my chest was hollow. Driving home, their voices replayed on an endless loop. Dad's certainty, Ryan's glee, Mom's silence. And the truth landed with brutal clarity. I wasn't their daughter. I was their wallet, their fallback, their convenience. That was the night the last illusion died. And soon, they would learn what happens when the scapegoat finally stops carrying the weight. The drive home that night felt longer than it should. Half streetlights stretching like blurred beads on a broken necklace. Every red light pressed their words deeper into me. Everything goes to Ryan. She's had enough from us already. That was her responsibility. But the sharpest cut wasn't Dad's voice or Ryan's laughter. It was Mom's silence. I kept replaying it. The tiny pause, the soft clink of her fork. The moment she could have spoken up and didn't. After everything I'd done for her, after every bill I paid, she couldn't muster a single ounce of defense. Asterisk by the time I pulled into my apartment garage. A numbness had wrapped itself around me like thick fog. I climbed the stairs slowly, as if each step confirmed something I didn't want to accept. Inside, the quiet was suffocating. I set my keys down, removed my shoes, made a cup of tea I didn't drink, and sat at my kitchen table with the lights off. The glow of the city leaked faintly through the blinds, but it felt like someone else's world, bright, warm, living. Mine felt frozen. I opened my banking app not to torture myself, but because something inside me needed clarity. Real numbers, real proof. There it was, thousands in hospital bills for Mom, payments for Ryan's insurance restored on, repairs, emergency equipment, replacements, suitally bills. I didn't even use the credit card balances. I never saw line after line of financial devotion to people who hadn't shown an ounce of emotional devotion in years. For a long moment, I just stared. Then the grief inside me shifted, subtle but unmistakable, into something firmer. Resolve. At 1:13 a.m., I opened my laptop. Invoices, autopay subscriptions, electronic transfers all lined up like dominoes. I clicked cancel on the first one, then the next, and the next. Each click echoed in the quiet, louder than their voices, louder than the betrayal. By the time dawn crept through my window, every financial tie binding me to them was severed. I whispered into the stillness, not anymore. I thought that would be the hardest part. It wasn't, because just after 7 a.m., when sunlight finally washed the kitchen in pale gold, my phone buzzed with a new message from Mom. I felt my stomach tighten as I reached for the phone, half expecting remorse, half hoping for some small acknowledgement of the hurt I carried home the night before. Instead, the message glared back at me like a shard of glass. Don't call or don't come. It's over between us. No punctuation, no explanation, no emotion, just finality. For a full minute, I stared at the screen, waiting for more. A follow-up, a correction, something. Nothing came. There are moments in life when pain arrives so sharply it doesn't feel like pain at all, just a clean, cold emptiness. That's what washed through me then. It didn't shatter me. It didn't make me cry. It simply confirmed what I overheard the night before. I was already gone from their lives. They were just putting it in writing. My tea sat untouched. The room hummed with the quiet of refrigerators and distant traffic, and my pulse slowed with each breath until I felt strangely, terrifyingly calm. I set my phone down. Then I typed 2 words. Got it. Nothing else. No anger. No pleading. No explanation. Just acceptance. Because the moment they tried to erase me, I realized they could only erase what I was still trying to be for them. And I wasn't trying anymore. I knew what would happen next. They would feel powerful. They would feel righteous. They would believe they had the upper hand. But they didn't know something fundamental. They had never valued me. They had never chosen me. They had never believed in me. I had always been the outsider, the helper, the afterthought. And now I was free. Of obligation, of expectation, of the invisible chains tying my worth to their approval. The silence in my apartment wasn't hollow anymore. It felt spacious, almost peaceful, like the first inhale after holding your breath underwater for too long. I looked again at the long list of canceled payments, at my empty fridge, at the half-finished project on my dining table, at the life I had built entirely by myself, even as they dismissed it. And something inside me, something quiet and long neglected, finally stirred. A voice that whispered, "It's your turn now." It would take days for the consequences of my God, it to ripple back to them. Hours before the panic set in. Mom's guilt, Dad's rage, Ryan's entitlement turning into fury as the safety net vanished beneath him. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't theirs. I was mine. By the time noon rolled around, my phone looked like a crisis hotline. 37 missed calls, 16 voicemails, and a long scroll of unread texts, all from the same 3 people who had spent a lifetime acting like I didn't exist, unless they needed something. Dad, Mom, Ryan. The irony stung, but it didn't surprise me. Last night, they erased me. This morning, they suddenly remembered I was alive. Dad's first voicemail wasn't even a greeting. Turn the payments back on. Immediately. His voice was clipped, irritated, as if I'd merely inconvenienced him, not severed 3 decades of emotional labor. Ryan's message came next, delivered with the subtlety of a hammer. "You're ruining everything. Don't be selfish. Fix this." No hi, no acknowledgement of yesterday's betrayal. Just orders, demands, expectations. Mom's single quotes S came last, soft, rehearsed, sweet. Sweetheart, please call us. This isn't like you, except it was exactly like me, or rather, the new me, the version who finally understood that love without respect is manipulation. I muted the phone and opened my laptop instead. Work emails, design drafts, client feedback, everything in that digital space reflected the truth my family never acknowledged. I was capable. I was needed. I was valued. Just not by them. I dove into the proposal revisions for Pacific Restaurant Group, letting their praise steady me. They believed in what I could build. They saw merit where my family saw inconvenience. It felt like inhaling fresh air after years of living in a room with windows painted shut. By late afternoon, the calls intensified. Dad's tone shifted from demanding to accusatory to panicked. You don't understand what you're doing, Tina. You're jeopardizing the entire family. You owe us. That word again. Oh, I paused mid-email and stared at the wall, letting that word roll through my mind. Every bill I paid, every crisis I covered, every time I stepped in to fix what Ryan broke, none of it had ever been enough to earn anything more than resentment disguised as obligation. My hands stopped shaking. For the first time, I felt grounded. Around 6, I took a walk around my building. The winter air was sharp, clean, grounding. City lights blinked in the distance, an indifferent skyline that somehow felt more like home than the house I grew up in. When I returned, 2 things had happened. My proposal had been approved, a meeting scheduled, a contract ready, $500,000 on the horizon. My family had reached the desperation stage. Mom's new message read, "We're struggling. The restaurants are behind. Your brother needs help. We're your family." No apology, no accountability, just another attempt to wrap their hands around my throat with a ribbon labeled love. I typed a response, then deleted it, then typed another, deleted that too. Nothing I wrote felt true enough without reopening wounds I had finally begun to clean. Instead, I left the phone face down and walked into my studio space. The sketches from my original proposal were still spread across the table. Hand-drawn concepts, color studies, notes scribbled in margins. Ideas they had dismissed. Ideas that would now rebuild 40 restaurants across the Pacific Northwest. Work healed me that night in a way I didn't expect. Not because success soothed the pain, but because creating something beautiful reminded me of who I was before they taught me to see myself as small. When I finally returned to my phone, Dad had left a final voicemail. "You think you can just walk away from this family? You'll regret it. We always take care of you. You take care of us. That's how this works." Except, no. That was how they had decided it worked. Not anymore. I opened the family group chat, something I never used except for emergencies, and typed my own message. "Please remove me from this conversation." Then I hit leave group. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was liberation. Financial ties severed. Emotional ties closing like a door finally allowed to swing shut. I wasn't running away from them. I was stepping back into myself. And for the first time in years, the weight on my chest loosened enough for me to breathe without pain. The morning after she left the family group chat, a strange quiet settled over Natalie's apartment. Not the suffocating kind she had grown up with, but something clearer and uncluttered. Almost electric silence that felt like possibility. Her parents' restaurant empire might have dismissed her ideas. Ryan might have mocked her degree, called her soft, claimed she didn't understand business. Her father might have waved off her sustainability model like it was a Pinterest project, instead of a data-backed renovation plan. But someone else saw value. Someone who wasn't blinded by favoritism or nostalgia or ego. Pacific Restaurant Group. Natalie dressed with steady hands, that morning black slacks, cream sweater, hair pinned back. She looked like someone who had stopped asking for permission. Someone making moves. The meeting was at 10 a.m. sharp. As she walked into the glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Control. Not the brittle, conditional kind her family dangled over her, but a calm, grounded authority. "Good to see you again, Natalie," the project manager said, shaking her hand. "We looked over your proposal last night. Let's talk numbers." Her heart thumped, but her voice stayed steady. Of course. She pulled out the same binder her family had pushed aside. At that awful dinner, the binder she had spent weeks perfecting, only to have her father slide it back across the table, like it was a child's drawing. But here, they leaned in. They took notes. They asked thoughtful questions. Her work finally sat in a room where it belonged. 20 minutes into the presentation, the director of operations interrupted her, but not to dismiss her. "Asterisk, to be honest," he said, "we've been searching for something exactly like this." Her breath caught. "We'd like you to lead redesign concepts for all 40 locations," he continued. "A full sustainability-forward rebrand, menu-integrated aesthetics, guest flow redesign, everything." Natalie blinked, stunned. "That's a major undertaking. That's why," he said with a small smile, "we want you They slid a folder across the table, clean, crisp, unmistakably official. Inside was a contract offer, scope of work, timeline, and the number at the bottom, $500,000. She stared as the digits swam in front of her eyes. $500,000 for the proposal her family had laughed at, for the vision her father said would never make money, for the work her brother said was cute. Her throat tightened not from shock, but from a deep, fierce vindication rising through her chest. She looked up. When can I start? Immediately. If you're ready. I'm ready. The contract was signed before noon. When she stepped outside into the cold Portland air, it felt like the sky had cracked open bright, sharp, cleansing. Her phone buzzed again in her bag. Dad demanding money. Ryan calling her selfish. Mom begging for help balancing the restaurant books. Natalie didn't even look at the notifications. Instead, she took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "They rejected me, but the world didn't." She walked toward her car with a steadiness that felt new, powerful, and long overdue. She had spent years pouring into a family who saw her only as a resource. Now, she was finally pouring into herself, and the world was paying her for it literally. $500,000. She smiled, not out of revenge, but out of recognition. For the first time, she wasn't the family scapegoat. She was the architect of her own future. The collapse didn't happen overnight. It happened the way most disasters do, slowly, then all at once. Within weeks of Natalie signing the $500,000 contract, rumors began circulating in Portland's restaurant scene. The Hayes restaurants were behind on vendor payments, equipment. Repairs were delayed. Staff paychecks bounced. Customers complained about inconsistencies and cut corners. And Ryan Golden Boy, heir apparent, was nowhere to be found when real work needed to be done. For the first time, the community saw what Natalie had known for years. Her parents built a legacy on image, not competence. When the bank calls came, her father blamed the economy. When the tax penalties hit, her mother blamed stress. When Ryan was questioned about missing funds, he blamed everyone else. But the truth was simple. They had used Natalie as the glue holding everything together. Without her financial support, without her quiet work behind the scenes, everything unraveled. Meanwhile, Natalie's life blossomed in the opposite direction. Her inbox overflowed with new clients impressed by the Pacific Restaurant Group project. She moved into a sunlit apartment overlooking the river. She took morning walks instead of emergency phone calls. She designed again not for approval, but for joy. And most importantly, her peace grew in the empty spaces where her family's demands used to live. 6 months later, Aunt Patricia called with the update Natalie knew was coming. "Sweetheart, they lost everything. The restaurants, the house. Ryan's under investigation. Your mother is working retail. Your father, well, he's finally learning humility." Natalie listened, not with triumph, but with clarity. She had saved them for years, but she was never meant to save them forever. Some people only learn when the person they depend on steps away. After the call, Natalie walked to her balcony, coffee in hand, the evening sun painting the sky gold. Peace settled over her like a warm blankets oft earned, deserved. She didn't hate her family. She didn't wish them harm. She just finally understood that removing herself wasn't cruelty. It was survival. They lost everything. She gained herself. And that was the real legacy. Message and lesson for the listener: sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from people who refuse to see your worth. You cannot rescue those who choose to stay blind. You cannot pour into people who see you only as a resource. And you should never set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. Your peace is not selfish. Your boundaries are not betrayal. And your worth does not depend on who fails to recognize it. If you've ever felt unseen or used by the people closest to you, you are not alone. And you are allowed to choose yourself.